I was speaking to Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, earlier, and he made the point that many Israelis don't necessarily buy what American intelligence is saying about the involvement of Iran. They also feel it's being done to ensure that Iran doesn't get militarily involved, because if there is an admission that Iran, like the Wall Street Journal has reported, trained some of these Hamas fighters on Iranian soil, then Iran getting directly militarily involved increases, and that's not good for the world, which is why US intel is trying to play down the direct involvement of Iranian intelligence and the Revolutionary Guards.
The Iranians are complicit. That does not mean that they orchestrated it. Those are two different things. They have provided consistently financial support, military support, and training right up through the attacks on October 7th. So no one should say the Iranians are not involved. They are involved, and my friend Ehud Barak is correct in that regard. They did not orchestrate or direct the attacks. The Israeli government, the war cabinet, accepts that, and that is a big reason why I am less concerned about expanding the war to Iran. But you raised an important point, which is, what do the Israeli people think? I want to say a couple things here. Number one, in a recent poll, 86% of the Israelis, the Jerusalem Post, the right-wing newspaper took this, 86% said that Netanyahu is personally responsible for the October 7th attacks. He was not able to defend Israel. The border security, the intelligence failed on his watch, and the Israelis blame him for it. So they want him out. That's number one. Number two, a small majority, about 60% of Israelis support a ground invasion. But only half of them, only 30% of them want it to be a long, extended ground invasion. Half of them want it to be short. They want it to be quick. So there is a lot of concern in Israel as well about getting involved in what could be a much more expanded and bloody war than even what we've already seen in the first 2 weeks.
If Iran didn't militarily orchestrate this operation, 2 weeks on, what's your assessment at present about who did? Because the scale, the magnitude and the precision of this military attack seems to suggest some very sharp military strategists and tacticians were engineering it. This doesn't, according to a lot of experts in India, seem to be the work or handiwork of just a terrorist organization. That seems quite inconceivable.
Yeah, the belief is that this is something that the Israelis and others underestimated Hamas. It involved 2,000 fighters, terrorists on the ground in Israel. This is not just like 9/11 in the United States. And again, 30 to 40,000 active fighters in Gaza. And they were empowered in part by Netanyahu. Let's keep in mind that Netanyahu was taking more land illegally in the West Bank. He wanted to undermine the Palestinian Authority, so he liked the idea of a stronger Hamas that he thought was just focusing on governing Gaza. Well, one thing that we can both agree on is that they were not just focused on governing Gaza. To pull this off would have been a matter of probably a year plus of planning, of strategic planning. A lot of this is new technology. You probably saw the videos of some of the GoPros that were being worn by the fighters as they were coming in, and then checking it against their maps of what they believed, what they expected in terms of the where the Israelis and how they laid out their forward bases. And then also you just had the fact that the Israelis were taking their eye off the ball. So many of the Israeli Defense Forces had been moved to the West Bank to respond to Palestinian reprisals, many of which were violent, as the Israelis were illegally taking more land. Netanyahu was not, there was enormous internal focus in Israel on all of those social demonstrations against the judicial reform. 1 million people out some weekends. That's 10% of the whole population. General strikes. Members of the senior defense and intelligence forces of Israel saying that they were not going to serve if Netanyahu proceeded with his judicial reforms. So some of this is Hamas being much more capable than people thought. Some of this is Israel truly being caught with their pants down. And there will be a full commission, like we had in the United States, the 9/11 Commission, that does a forensic investigation into just exactly how the Israelis got this so wrong.
American President Joe Biden, in public comments, has said that his gut and his instinct tells us, or tells him, that Hamas attacked Israel at this time because of, amongst various reasons, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Now, we've discussed this when the G20 summit happened. You were on our show soon after, and we were talking about the strategic significance of that corridor. Do you think this is actually possible that the G20 summit happens in September, and now in October, Hamas expedites the timeline for this because of the IMEE and because Israel and Saudi Arabia are getting closer together?
The India is responsible. I hadn't heard that yet, but I'm happy to debunk it. Again, the fact that this was going to take over a year to put together, and we're talking about...
Why would the president say it? Because what you're saying is absolutely correct. It baffles logic and it doesn't really make sense, but he said this publicly, the American president.
No. But he said it in the context of the broader relationship, the normalization of relations between the Gulf states and Israel. And that, of course, has been happening for a long time. So in this regard, the corridor that you talk about, which still is very much a nominal thing, but is very much part of a broader geopolitical pivot, which normalized and stabilized high-level politics in the region, but at the expense of the Palestinians. So the Abraham Accord is part of that, and much more significant, the diplomatic breakthrough between Israel and Bahrain, Morocco, and the UAE. Then there's the Saudi relationship with Israel, which was moving towards normalization. It was imminent. It was going to happen within probably a couple of months. Biden's been talking a lot more about that than he's spoken about India's role in the corridor, but the corridor as well. In other words, you have all of these different efforts that are showing that Israel can be a part of normal civil society and normal geopolitics in the region and beyond. And not only are the Palestinians forgotten about, but literally their position gets worse every day. So absolutely, for all of those in the world that believe that you can do everything you want with Israel and the Palestinians can be forgotten, that's not acceptable. And I think everybody learned that. Everybody learned their, in a sense, collective complicity in forgetting about the Palestinians on October 7th.
Now, the two-state solution has been a dying idea, at least in Israel. The Netanyahu government has been working very hard to bury it. Does this attack make a two-state permanent solution even more improbable, because it's being spoken of now more internationally than it has in the last 2 decades?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been talking about Israel a lot for the last year, and no one's been asking me about the two-state solution, and now they are. So you're right about that. But, you have to have not only the international community focused on it, you have to have governance on the ground. And right now, governance on the ground is focusing on fighting a war that's going to expand. It's not focusing on how to create peace. You're going to have more radicalization among the Palestinians because of all of those civilians that are getting killed. And you're going to have more religious radicalization in Israel, too, after what happened on January 7th. So I think we're getting farther away, not closer. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But, it was Henry Kissinger that once says you don't get peace until all sides are exhausted. And it is true that we're getting closer to all sides getting exhausted. So I don't know if that's a two-state solution, given the reality of what Gaza will look like. And we still have no idea how Gaza will be governed, who will be in charge, what will be the security mechanisms. We're not close to that. But certainly in terms of the Palestinians in the West Bank, I think there will be significant and redoubled efforts after all of this is over. When the after is very much an open question at this point.